I hate to say it, but unfortunately, it's true. Most of us are poorer now than what we were 5 years ago. Not only have we not made ground, not only have we not moved forward, but many of us are actually poorer. And as a financial advisor for over 20 years, I think it's important that we look at the data and we face the facts. We're feeling the pressure. Many of us are saying we don't feel better off today than what we did 5 years ago, 7 years ago. And unfortunately, the data backs this up. Let's look at some data from the Federal Reserve, which looks at the median household income and how that has increased since the 1980s. So this goes back to 1985, and you can see back then the median household was making a little over $56,000. And it's rocky, it goes up and down, but you can see in general, it goes from the lower left to the upper right-hand corner, which is a good thing. It means that Americans have been doing better. And there's been other dips, but there's one big dip that's taken place, right? We had a big dip during the great financial crisis, but then thankfully we made up ground and it kept moving up, the median household income. And this is in inflation adjusted dollars. You can see it peaked out just before the pandemic at about $78,000. But unfortunately, since the pandemic, that trend has gone the wrong way. Let's zoom in on this lowering part. And you can see it's unfortunately, it's pretty much a straight line down. We tapped out, we peaked out, I should say, at a little over $78,000. And right now, the most recent data as of 2022 has us below $75,000 at about $74,000. So the average household has lost ground and has lost significant ground. We are making $4,000 less on an inflation adjusted basis today than what we were before the pandemic. And I don't know about you, but most American households, $4,000 is a lot of money, right? Over half of American households making $100,000 a year or more don't save a penny. They don't save anything. And that's a separate issue. But if people making $100,000 a year are not saving anything, people making $78,000 a year, I think, are doing really well if they can save 10 to 15% of their money. Now, unfortunately, I don't think 10% is enough in today's world. I know it's aspirational. I think most of us should be shooting for closer to 20. So that would be about $15,000 a year. So this represents $4,000 represents about a fourth of what many of us are trying to save. So that's a huge burden for us. And what is causing this? One of the things that's causing it, obviously, is inflation after the pandemic really soared. Most recent data from the Federal Reserve shows that inflation is coming down and it's now pretty close to the 2% goal. Importantly, that does not mean that prices at the grocery store are going to come down. It just means that the rate that the prices were increasing that rate of increase should slow down. So my $3 box of Raisin Bran before the pandemic, which is now $6, is never coming back down to $3. I have since switched to a store brand. I think many of us have done that, and that's fine. But that $6 box of Raisin Bran is not coming down to $5. It's not coming down to $5.50. It's just hopefully is not going to increase as quickly. So one of the reasons that we're poorer now than what we were before the pandemic is because of inflation. Another reason is the country's, while unemployment is at historic lows, the reality is, I think, the U.S. is going through what I call a rolling recession. There are pockets of the economy, clearly tech in 2022 went through a rolling recession. I think it's still there. We're seeing a lot of layoffs there. We're seeing layoffs. We're seeing retail stores continuing to lay off. We're seeing restaurants continuing to close down. So I think we're seeing a rolling recession where different pockets, depending on where your job is, are contracting, are decreasing. And there's a woman that worked at the Federal Reserve, Claudia Sam, her last name spelled S-A-H-M, and she came up with what's called the SAM rule. And the reason this is important is according to this methodology, where you look at the rolling 3-month unemployment rate, and if it increases by a 0.5 percentage point or more, the 3-month, to kind of buffer out some of those fluctuations, that says that we're already in a recession. And if you look at the SAM rule here, these gray vertical bars, that is where there were recessions, and then you can see the SAM rule there juxtaposed onto this. In the blue is the unemployment rate. And you can see here that the SAM rule has been triggered again. You can see that big spike when the pandemic started. But the SAM rule's been triggered again. And what that tells me is not only has inflation cut away at our earnings, but the worker power that we saw, there was a shortage of workers, which I think was actually a good thing. For companies to have to deal with a shortage of workers, to have to compete for high quality employees. I think that's a good thing for us as employees, not so good for the employers. But the pendulum, in my opinion, has swung. And it's swung too far in favor of the corporations, where the corporations are getting the majority of the profits. The upper echelon, the upper management team is getting a lot of that profit, but unfortunately, the day-to-day worker is not seeing that. And at the end of the pandemic, we saw that pendulum swing, at least in my town, for fast food workers. You know, they were offering a $500, $1,000 sign-on bonus to get people working. We saw wages start to increase for the first time in a long time. And this helps us save, right? And saving money both for our intermediate goals, maybe buying a house or getting ready to get married, something like that. Saving money for those goals and saving money for retirement is important. And let me show you some data that's kind of startling. This is from the Wall Street Journal. And this is the average retirement savings in the United States. And you can see almost half of all American households have $0 saved for retirement. And if you add up all of the numbers up to 100,000, so not including 100,000, but up to 99,999, that's almost 80% of Americans have less than $100,000 saved for retirement. And unfortunately, that's not enough money now to retire, in my opinion. Now, the Federal Reserve does a study. It's called the Survey of Consumer Finance. It would be fair for somebody to say, hey, Azul, that chart you showed from the Wall Street Journal that shows 80% of people have less than $100,000, that's just for their retirement accounts. So this data from the Federal Reserve shows people's net worth, which is the value of all of their assets, all of their savings, less the value of their debt, less the value of their liability. So for most of us, this is going to be the value of all of our savings account, regular savings as well as retirement savings, as well as our home equity. And here in the United States, for people 60 and older, it's about 80% of people 60 and older own a home. So home equity is an important component. And this shows what our net worth is. Median household net worth, you can see for people under 35, it's a little less than $40,000. For 35 to 44, it's $135,000. 45 to 54, it's a little under $250,000. But now we're getting close to retirement age. 55 to 64, $365,000. 65 to 74, it actually continues to increase. It's a little under $410,000. And then as people start spending down their money in retirement, it drops to $335,600. But many people do not want to move. They don't want to sell their house. So while they have home equity, our retirement savings is also an important component because we retire on cash flows. And our cash flows are going to come from our investments. If we have any rental property or other income producing tools, in investment in a company, for most of us it would be rental properties. Social Security, which we know is in a precarious situation, something's got to be done there. And then for most Americans, we no longer have access to the fourth one, which is a pension. But about 20% of Americans still do have access to a pension. So we retire on cash flows, not on net worth. And so if you're feeling like you're poor today, then what you felt maybe 5 or 10 years ago, you're not alone. In making the decision based on that, on when you retire, is super important because unfortunately we're not going to stay healthy forever. If you're 60 years old, most of us are going to have less than 1,000 weeks of healthy active time remaining, which is why I want to make sure you enjoy what I call the youth of your senior years. And that's why I made this video up here. 8 things to stop doing in your 50s and 60s in order to enjoy your journey until you're ready to retire. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in that one. Bye-bye.